On this note, I would like to thank all the participants in this session, the speakers, those who took part in our discussions, and to the audience and our interpreters for their inputs and contributions, and hope to meet you again in this format or otherwise. Indeed, I think it was very entertaining and interesting. I hope that our audience liked it also very much. And if you have any questions remaining, please, you are free to write those questions into the chat room or using our emails, and we would be able to provide you with answers ourselves, or we'll pass on your questions to the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Hello once again, dear friends. I hope you can see and hear me well enough. I am on vacation now, not at the office, but anyway, I'm so delighted to moderate today's session. If I have problems with either connection or sound quality, my colleague Cyril will help me moderate the session. Those who have been observing the activities of the Russian Cluster Observatory know for sure that the startup topic and the unicorns has been quite significant for us for quite a while, for several years. We have been studying policies in regions and cities, and our colleagues look at big companies, and Foresight comes in handy here. While many scholars have noted that a very important trajectory to develop the economy and technology is to go for new companies, such new companies that all of a sudden become leaders, make important decisions and deployments. Who could have known 20 years ago that the bigwigs of the car industry would give way to Tesla? You know, all of a sudden one has been able to create a new car manufacturing business from scratch. And, you know, China is close at the foothills. And we have been studying some of the cities there. And by 2025, they have the target of e-vehicles at 80%. No one could have imagined that in the past. And there's a great deal of new brands no one ever heard of before. So these scholars and the researchers paid heed to such companies a while ago. Now we have a close look at the unicorns. These are the companies with the valuation of $1 billion in less than 10 years and that have not still gone to an IPO. Several years ago, they have become the subject of everyone's scrutiny, and there are major spheres that want investigation. There may be some new developments, some new discoveries, and new patterns. So for us, what is of importance is to preclude that these companies should go, and we should attract more companies of that kind. Anyway, it is an important sphere, policy-wise. We have a very interesting panel makeup. You will hear about new research and state-of-the-art discoveries. Our friend and colleague Bruno Fischer will show us the foundations, will account for the foundations of entrepreneurial ecosystems, something he has been into for a number of years. There may be regional or national or municipal or urban ecosystems. Some of them work well, others get stalled, so he will tell us about the criteria and the typology. It's going to be a theoretical presentation, I think. Then Georgiy Bobylev will brief you of our joint study. This year, we have had a look at rapidly growing companies from the Techuspeh ranking, technological success ranking, and we tried to figure where they migrate. You may say that all of them move to Moscow, but don't be in a haste to make conclusions, and George will open up new avenues and revelations. Then there are 2 papers yet to be published. Kirill will tell us about the venture flows. Every now and then we hear people say that unicorns go where the money is, and some of the American funds may boast of raising more than 100 unicorns, so they have accumulated huge expertise and track record. But it's not only about private funds. There's a host of interesting patterns, and we are still formalizing the outcomes. And Kirill will take the wraps off that. And Tatiana definitely will come out in our Foresight journal on migration patterns with respect to the founders of such unicorn companies. I'm proud to say that we have been able to study all the existing unicorns in the world. We have found their founders, and we figured where they were born and where they currently reside. And we have singled out lots of very interesting conclusions and novel things. So I will now become silent and give way to my colleagues to present the outcomes and the findings. And the first one to speak, as per the agenda, is Bruno Fischer, who is an associate professor in the University of Campinas, Brazil. Bruno, can you hear us loud and clear?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, good. I think I can move the slide. As I'm going back.
Yes,
on
we
the
see
slide.
your presentation and you move the slides.
Okay. So now you can see the first slide, right?
Right.
Thank you very much. This platform is new for me. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Evgeny. It's been a pleasure working with you for the past 2 years or so, and with people from HSE since 2017. I just realized that yesterday I had a meeting with Dirk Meissner, and I thought it was 2019, but it was prior to that. So it's been a pleasure to be involved with you guys for the past 5 or 6 years, and hopefully for many, many years to come. So my presentation today is based on a book chapter, which is going to come out next year, hopefully, depending on the publisher. But it will come out in the Edward Elgar Handbook on Entrepreneurial Ecosystems. This is based on a collaboration with André Alves from the Getúlio Vargas Foundation. It's a think tank and a university in Brazil focused on business management. And also Nick Von Artes, who is based at George Washington University in the United States. As Evgeny mentioned, this is, I wouldn't say this is a theoretical piece, but it's definitely a conceptual piece. So this is something that we've been thinking about for the past 3 or 4 years based on some empirical results. And earlier this year, we got the opportunity to actually organize these thoughts. So as you're gonna see, this goes deeper into the nature of the ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystems configurations. And this is important particularly considering the case of unicorns, because I've been involved in research in this topic with people from HSE led by Evgeny. And what research demonstrated is that we have different profiles in terms of the configurations of the ecosystems. So in order to promote more unicorns, in order to promote high growth new firms, you have actually different ways to get there. And what I would try to bring in this presentation, in this paper, and I'm happy to share with you once it's published, it's what is behind that. So what comes before? Why do these different configurations emerge? So this is basically what I'm going to talk about today. So the starting point I bring, this is the seminal contribution from Eisenberg, right? I'm not going to go through all these dimensions, but the idea is that entrepreneurial ecosystems, they should, based on early literature, look like this. So they have instruments of policy, some market characteristics, availability of finance, cultural traits, support infrastructure, and availability of human capital. So this 6 macro dimensions, they should be present. So this is the fundamental configuration which is attached to entrepreneurial ecosystems. So this is basically dimension neutral. So it doesn't pose any sort of hierarchy among these dimensions. So all of them play a role and they promote entrepreneurship. Not clearly how this causal path takes place, but this was not a concern in this early literature. So we moved forward, fortunately. So this is the main contribution as per citation counts to entrepreneurial ecosystems literature in the last decade. So this is the model by Eric Stam from Utrecht University. So what is different here is that he tries to build a sort of pyramid scheme. So you have the framework conditions, which are underlying traits of local ecosystems that promote systemic conditions to take place. So you have the formal institutions, culture, physical infrastructure, and demand as basic elements that allow networks, leadership, finance, talent, knowledge, support services to connect, interact, and promote entrepreneurial activity, and more specifically in the case of this session here today, in terms of high growth new firms and hopefully unicorns for the local ecosystems. So this is actually a very important conceptual piece, because it guided empirical research, quantitative research, to see if this actually holds throughout the world, and it doesn't. This is what's more important. And this is a question we made back in 2016, 2017, and we tested in Brazil. And it was actually the second paper to come out dealing with this. And since 2018, many papers came to life dealing with this. So what we asked, if the ecosystems, they follow similar trajectories, if they actually resemble, all of them resemble this structure, and they don't, right? So this is what we did. This is the state of São Paulo in Brazil, and we identified 4 different paths, and they have similarities, but they also have important differences amongst them. So path 3 on the bottom right side of your screen, this is the center of it. It's the city of São Paulo, which is the major city in Latin America, or at least in South America, economic-wise. But also you have in this state, you have some relatively independent regions, right, in terms of different configurations. So when we ran QCA, so qualitative comparative analysis, we noticed that we do have actually pretty important elements that cut across all the 4 paths. So the presence of innovation habitats, such as incubators and technological parks, the intensity of knowledge-intensive jobs, and the level of development, HDI, the Human Development Index for each city. So these are elements that cut across all of the systems. But interestingly, universities are not present in path 3, and this presented another line of research for us to explore, because path 3 is the one with the city of Sao Paulo. This is the most developed ecosystem, so to speak. And we're working on that, but what appears is that the importance, the centrality of universities, it's not that they don't contribute to more mature ecosystems, is that they are not pivotal. So they lose relative weight in terms of importance in favor of business-oriented activities. But this is another matter that we've been empirically exploiting. Right. What's really important to gather here is that there are different configurations, and I'm presenting to you one paper that we worked on, but several over the past, especially over the past 2 years, have been published, and all of them, 100%, they identify heterogeneous paths, heterogeneous configurations. So what we're asking here today is that why this happens, and this is something that is really unexplored so far, right? So we took pieces from other sources of literature outside of entrepreneurial ecosystems, and we came up with this, and this is a very first tentative model. So please feel free to criticize it, and I'm criticizing it right now. It's gonna get published in this format, but I'm trying to refine it, right? So basically what we're proposing here, and this is the core of my presentation today. So at the center, you have the entrepreneurial ecosystem configuration. So something similar to what Eric Stem presented, but as I mentioned right now, it varies. It doesn't necessarily represent all ecosystems or even most ecosystems. And the theme of capital availability, of venture capital investment, for instance, is really important in this case. And this is also something that we've been empirically exploring. If you take, for one example, the city of Sao Paulo, 98.5% of the venture capital that goes to the city of Sao Paulo comes from outside of Brazil. So there's no, if you look in relative terms, there's no local capital availability whatsoever. So we're talking about 1.5% that's negligible for the entrepreneurial industry in the city of Sao Paulo, right? So it's coming from somewhere else. And this is the case for actually many ecosystems, especially outside of the California region in the United States, which has a strong endogenous venture capital industry, and also New York, less, but also very strong venture capital industry. But outside of the United States, it's really hard to find a mature venture capital industry locally, right? So the core of this figures that the EE configuration will vary, and so it will be heterogeneous across different locations. And what we're proposing here is a way to understand why it varies. Why do these configurations change? So we have three immediate aspects. So the first one is called, it's the maturity stage, that we're not actually calling it maturity stage anymore. We're calling it historical trajectory, right? This changed 72 hours ago because of paper I read. So I didn't have enough time to change it in the presentation, but we're looking at things that shape the path, so the history, the trajectory of each ecosystem. And this is interrelated with the spatial features of ecosystems. So this is also really important. Usually we take cities or microregions or provinces as the unit of analysis. And this is an easy solution, actually, because it's much more comfortable for us to access data that is already structured based on cities and regions, provinces, states, and so on. But this is not actually how all of ecosystems are structured in space, in geographical space. So we've been studying this, and what actually happens is that entrepreneurial ecosystems, they have different spatial morphologies, right? So if you take, for instance, and you compare, there's an author from Japan that did this. It compared Tokyo with Bangalore in India. And then you notice that the ecosystem in Tokyo is much more inward oriented than the one in Bangalore for historical reasons. So it's connected to the historical trajectory, or the maturity stage, as we call it here. So this also will shape what kinds of components you need in the configuration locally. And third, the sectoral profile of the region. And this is really important because most research on entrepreneurial ecosystems has traditionally taken the ecosystem as a sector agnostic concept, right? So you do not have to consider which sectors are more concentrated in the region in terms of entrepreneurial firms. And recent research has addressed that, identified actually what you have is nested, even in complete ecosystems like London. You have nested sub-ecosystems within the city. If we take smaller ecosystems, you might have sectoral specialization, and the sector specializations, they alter the configuration of entrepreneurial ecosystems, because each sector might have different needs, and these different needs might alter the configuration of the ecosystem itself. So it's easy. If I take one example, if you have a sectoral profile based on science intensive industries, then the university or research institutes are expected to have a much larger role to play in the local ecosystems, and that won't happen in industries that are not so much based on scientific principles, right? So these are the three immediate aspects that affect, or antecedents, so to speak, that affect the configuration of entrepreneurial ecosystems. But also behind that, you have the two features that affect all of these components. Well, the first one, which is largely neglected, not neglected by all authors, but by most authors, is that it's the role of entrepreneurial agency. So most literature take ecosystems as sort of factories of entrepreneurs, of high growth new firms, right? So you have the configuration, and that configuration will lead to more entrepreneurs or stronger entrepreneurial activity. And that actually neglects that the configuration itself is also a function of entrepreneurial agency. So to put it simply, entrepreneurs are not passive agents within the ecosystem. Actually, they shape, or they try to shape, the ecosystem in their favor. And that includes even institutions, right? So they try to shape all of those environments to foster a better context for them to operate. So, and obviously this is an endogenous process, right? So you have entrepreneurial agency, which creates the ecosystem, and then the ecosystem favors stronger or weaker entrepreneurial agency, right? So the role of the individual in the ecosystem. And also more recently, we have this role of the digital processes affecting how entrepreneurial ecosystems look like. So if you see the literature on digital entrepreneurial ecosystems, the role of place, the role of geography has been diminished in favor of global platforms. So this is also an aspect that will affect how the entrepreneurial ecosystem looks like in terms of configurations. And this is key for us to understand what's going on behind all of those configurations to better guide policy, right? So if you take policymakers worldwide right now, and the entrepreneurial ecosystem concept has become a beacon. So everyone wants to develop the new Silicon Valley or something like that. So everyone wants to develop their own entrepreneurial ecosystem, and they're actually looking at configurations that probably are not the best representations of the characteristics that they have locally. So we actually need to understand why this happens. And this is a big step forward in terms of actually developing a theory of entrepreneurial ecosystems, right? So what's next? And this is my last slide, right? So we still have a long way to go. This is a first conceptual attempt to understand the morphology of entrepreneurial ecosystems. It's not only how they look like, but why do they look like they do? So why is there such heterogeneity, and what are the drivers of this? So we definitely need empirical approaches dealing with these features instead of focusing solely on how the entrepreneurial ecosystem looks like in terms of the immediate configuration. And also we need to relate this definitely with the role of how to shape more sustainable entrepreneurial ecosystems. This is a project I've been working on with Dirk Meisner. So since we're looking at this configuration, so what kinds of elements do we need to strengthen if we are to promote more sustainable ecosystems, both environmentally and definitely from the social perspective, right? Because it's undeniable that we've been facing huge social distress across the world because of social platforms, social media, right? So we also need to take that into account when we're trying to design these ecosystems that fosters unicorns. So what kind of unicorns do we actually need, and what kind of unicorns do we want to nurture, right? So thank you very much. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay at the end of the session because I have a flight to catch in about 90 minutes. But again, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Evgeny, for
Bruno, I know,
the invitation.
and so we have comments and questions to use. Yes, we don't also have so much time, so please be short when answering. So the first is kind of suggestion, because you show the picture and asked what is missing. So, and I think so. And there were territorial experts, sectoral, maturity level, and so I think it's quite easy, because many people say, of course, it's very difficult to catch, but it's institutions, of course, because there is a bunch of literature. What is meta, territory, geography, or institutions? Yes, this huge war of great theorists. And what is, to be particular, what is institution? I think maybe to think the role of the government, because the level of centralization. Just compare the France, yes, and thinking about Hofstede research and perception of power distance, yes, he called it, very high in France, and it's very centralized, and Germany decentralized. Not one leading city, but many cities, specialized leading at the same time, like Berlin, startup hub, European, very important one, and München is where corporations sitting. Frankfurt am Main is where financial institutions are located, and so on. So different partners, two countries close to each other, maybe to institutions. And maybe it's also affect this sectoral or organization of economy, which industries are flavored. Maybe also the framework of Asimoglu and Robinson, where they divided inclusive and exclusive societies. Maybe that also help. But also to the same time, I agree with you that we could take one country and we found different ecosystems within the territory. I don't want to go now, don't have so much time to go in depth, but in Russia it is the same. And so I'm sure that Washington and Silicon Valley, San Francisco, yes, to be precise, it's different ecosystems. Yes, and we know, yes, that American researchers, so they like to compare Boston area and Silicon Valley. Now it's mixed. It's not like it was 7 decades ago, but nevertheless. So it was the comment, and the question was from one of our listeners is, how do you use the concept of Richard Florida of creative class, first of all?
I'm just going to make a quick comment. The role of institutions, actually, that's a puzzle for us, how to include that, because it's part of the configuration. So it should be understood as part of the core of the model, but it definitely should also be included as a across all of the dimensions, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to actually add that. Institutions, and I really like that literature, but it's sort of really hard to include it in the model, to try to make sense of it. But that's actually a really important thing. So the role of creative class, creative industries. So I've worked a lot with the literature of Richard Florida and empirical papers. I think in this case, in this specific case, we can make a relationship with the sectoral part of the model, right? Because he has all of those comments about the homosexuality index and the creative class and Bohemian index and all those things. Basically, it's a lot based on the example of Austin in Texas. So it creates a melting pot. It's the term he uses, and that's actually strongly related to specific kinds of industries. That's what the sectoral thing is about. Creative industries, yes, definitely, right? So he proved that with data in the United States. I'm not sure if someone did that to other parts of the world, because it's really hard to have good data for that, but it actually works for the United States. So cities that rank high in those terms, they have stronger ecosystems in terms of creative industries. And but I wonder, and this is a question, right? I wonder if it has the same effect on other industries. So it could be included as part of this sectoral rationale. Obviously, these creative industries, they are at least right now part of this buzz on entrepreneurial activity. So most unicorns are probably can be classified as part of the creative industry. So everyone wants that, right? And I don't know. For me, it would make sense to put this argument, and I'm going to take note of that in the sectoral discussion.
Yes. And by the way, for those who is interested in creative industries, so I want and it's a pleasure to welcome to our conference, which just follow this one. So it will be a special conference on creative economy, and it will be held this Friday. So it is online. It is in English and in Russian, so simultaneously translation. So welcome everybody, and we also, because we're also very engaged in this topic, very interested, and we make a lot of measurements that could be interesting for you. Bruno, I have a little question. No, it's a big question, but I want you to answer in one sentence, because we are also very interested in this. Yes, of course, so it's very tough. But you said for yourself that you don't have so much time. So, and the role of universities in entrepreneurial ecosystems, regions, cities, because it's very important now for our session. One sentence, of course, university, very complex influence, impact, but what do you think for the entrepreneurial the ecosystem the most important now? Just one aspect.
In
Yes.
terms of the university,
The channel of their influence, how they influence.
a student. I don't even need a sentence. I can say one word. And I'm going to explain that, right? So I'm in a hurry, but not that much. And this is actually a pretty good question. So you have different channels, definitely. The most important is students, right? Because it's the easiest channel.
And that's the
for
direct
universities
one, yes,
right
the
now.
most direct.
It's direct, right? So you have this formation of highly qualified human capital in top universities, and these people, they go on and do whatever they like. So this lies outside of the control of the university. It can nurture this entrepreneurial mindset in students, but it doesn't have to actually manage it. And this is important because universities, at least in Brazil, I'm not sure, but probably in Russia is very similar. It's similar even in the United States. If you rule out Stanford and a couple more universities in the US, universities are actually really bad at managing technology co-creation. It's not transfer, co-creation. It's different. So universities are good at patenting technologies and not making money out of it, right? Because they make technologies that have no fit with the market in general. So, and this would be a channel, but universities are not really good at it.
I get your answer. Thank you very much. And thank you for your participation. And please find a slot in December because we want to return to our topic of financing unicorns and discussing, yes, with you, our collaboration. Okay, thank you, Bruno. And I switch to Russian, yes. Друзья, теперь...
Friends, now I've asked Bruno about the role of universities. It was not it was for a reason, and that was a prelude for our research. But the answer was quite obvious. I'm so happy to see Georgiy, Bobylev. I know that it's quite late out there, and I guess it's winter time. Well, it's the same with us here. Could you walk everyone through our research? What are the key highlights? Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy to see everyone, hear everyone. That's some joint research as part of my internship with the Russian Cluster Observatory that focuses on the role of universities in the geography of startups and innovations. So we looked into the model of the Siberian Academic Center. Everything revolves around the university. Everything would collapse without the university. I also once stumbled upon a research on systems and their role in universities. That was a major research. And the big question was, why did you set up this company? And they said, well, because I live here. And so we decided to dig into it. And our premise was as follows. Imagine people come to a university from a different city for studies. So does their arrival have any impact on the establishment of those startups? So we took the startups and we looked at the founders. Where do they come from? So maybe they used to live in another city and they come to study to this university. So this frame stands for a city. So they come to the city, they set up a company. It's really simple. So that's how we wanted to study it. We took some key factors for analysis. We needed to understand where the founders were born. That was stage number one. Stage number two, we looked at the universities where they went to study. And the third stage was when we looked at the firms that were set up by them. We looked at the Tech Up 2019 rating that was issued by the Russian venture company together with its founders. So we wanted to put together a list of those founders, and most firms, unfortunately, don't have the information of their founders on their website. And we had to put together a methodology to get the data. So we looked at the unified registry, we looked at these companies, and we looked at the holdings of those shareholders. We did a ranking. We applied some complex math algorithm, and that was the algorithm that defined whether they fit the criteria of for being a founder. Some of the firms, yeah, we definitely knew who the founder was because these are well-known companies. We know who's behind. So that was the methodology we relied on. So there are three types of firms. Big ones, revenue over 2 billion rubles. Medium ones, revenue from 800 million to 2 billion rubles. And smaller firms with revenue up to 800 million rubles. Again, there are some criteria for the growth rates. For big firms, it's about 12%. For small ones, their growth rate should be at least 20%. Another key criteria is that they should provide modified, upgraded, updated products, and also invest in R&D, come up with high-tech innovations. And we also look at their investment into R&D, their innovation costs. So as I said, we use the Tech Up rating from 2019, and that includes 110 fast-growing companies, including 33 big firms, 17 medium companies, and 60 smaller firms, with a total revenue of about 23.6 billion rubles, which is quite a big number. This rating geographically is very, and industry-wise is very diversified. Biotechnology, IT, definitely IT accounted for the biggest share in that rating. Geography-wise, most of them are located in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And if you look at the tail end, we found 5 firms in Kazan, 4 in Novosibirsk, and 8 in the city of Perm. Now, here's the final data sample. That featured 60 companies, or 54.5% of the original 100 companies of the rating. They're registered in 23 cities, most of them in Moscow, 10 in St. Petersburg. Perm was really an insight for us. 3 in Kaluga, 3 in Kazan. And so The 85 founders studied in some of the universities, and we identified 5 scenarios of establishing a company. And we looked at that in line with where they were, where they lived, and where they studied. So some of the factors overlap. So you have the home body scenario. That's basically half of them. These are the people who were born in the same city and who studied in the same place, and that's where they worked. That's where they founded the company. Now, as for our second scenario, that's about a fourth of all the companies, a quarter of all the firms. They were born in a different place, then they came to a different city with new opportunities, embraced those opportunities, and following graduation, they set up their firms. And then you've got the Rolling Stone scenario. Some of the founders were born in one place, studied another place, and registered their firm in a third place. And you've got the return scenario, those who came back. So they came back to set up the company in the same city they were born. And the brain drain scenario is also a valid one. So you seem to have, you seem to be born in one city, you went to study there, but you set up a company in a different city. Now, interestingly enough, if we combine the two scenarios, the home body and associated with the alma mater, then we can realize that it's like 27 or 72%. So almost 73% of the firms are established in those firms where people completed their studies. That means that the role of universities is quite high. Now, what are these scenarios? What are the universities that attracted those students with their brand? And we did a ranking of those universities based on the number of the founders. Well, number one is in Moscow State University. And then we looked at the ranking of Times Higher Education 2023, for example. What we found out is that basically these are the same universities, the top 5. They're marked with the same color. What that means is that strong entrepreneurs were nurtured by strong universities. Universities can help to consolidate those teams. That 16% of the companies were founded by the several graduates of the same university. So university is like an ecosystem, the glue that pieces together a team of successful innovators. Now let's look at the entire cycle. So here is to the left, you have universities and its brand. So the blue embodies direct links, and the red ones is the reverse links. So you have the home body who basically studies at the same in the same city, and there are also some talented applicants who come from elsewhere. And it's great that you might have some innovative infrastructure, prototyping labs, and that ecosystem prompt the establishment of innovative firms, and we also need venture capital and market infrastructure, access to the market. And then what happens is that it's a kind of a feedback loop. It boosts the brand of the university. It means that these investors can bring up successful innovators, successful startups, and that also attracts new talents. So universities help to set this loop, this momentum in motion, to make sure that you have these startups on your territory. So we need to support these brands, these universities. Thank you. That's basically it. So the first slide featured a photo of Novosibirsk University. And one of the fun facts is that you can actually give a treat to squirrels. So the environment does play a role. So some play, some students come over. So 20% of the people who study there come from abroad, and so they might help to establish future unicorns. Thank you. Thank you so much, Georgiy. Well, I hope we'll have more time. Now, what I'd like is to underline is, yeah, we do have these homebodies, as you call them, couch potatoes. So half of them were born, and so they studied and they set up the company there. This seems to be the most popular scenario, but look at it from a different angle. Well, Russia appears to be a place where mobility is not really high. But if you look at, but still, people traveled, had to go. It's not migration. They had to change their place. It's kind of a signal, I guess. Well, we also studied some foreign research, and the more talented is your cohort, like Nobel laureates, they always travel from one place to another. Right, about 50% of the startups in Silicon Valley are set up by foreign-borns. They not just traveled from Texas to California. No, these are foreign-born talents. And there's also evidence that 70% of all IITs in the Silicon Valley are foreign-born. And it's not just in the US. It's not just in the Silicon Valley. Take Toronto, that's the leader. That's the real leader. Take Singapore in Asia, Australia. This is an extremely new, exciting world. And that's quite a tough world, I might say. Now, if you want some more tidbits, you can look at the universities that are attract more talents, more founders. You can find it in Express. It's been published. Well, definitely, Moscow plays a key role because it's the capital. At first glance, it might seem that here it's Moscow, it might be Beijing, Paris. They will definitely attract a lot of talents. There are a lot of homebodies who just don't travel, right? But people are just complacent. But if you look at the Russian unicorns, we know that a lot of them have left. And we've identified an interesting pattern. Most of them went abroad, bypassing Moscow. Well, you've heard about these firms some from Yakutia, some from Novosibirsk. I don't know where the headquarters. They have an office in Luxembourg, right? Pladix went from Vologda to another place. It's not just an issue for Moscow, it's an issue for capitals. Previously, when the world was not globalized in the same way as today, they've just exploited their status as administrative center, but the world is different today. So you cannot just use your status to attract talents. You need other tools. Well, as you understand, I'm moving to our next speaker. Thank you very much, Georgiy. So if there are any questions, I'm going to put them to you. I'm so happy to see you again. I'd like to give the floor to Tatiana, who'll talk about migration and about the unicorns. And it's not just Russia. We looked at all the countries, at all the unicorns. We'll show you a sneak peek preview of our research. It's not been yet published. It will be published in a month.
Very, very good evening, dear colleagues. Just let me open my deco slides. Here it is. Yes, it's the final slide though. You may go back to the first one. This is what I'm doing. All right, I represent the ISSEK of the HSC. The topic of my report is Global Research of the Unicorn Companies International Migration. That was held in co-authorship with my colleagues Kutsenko and Tuchev, both Kirills. The full version will come out in the 4th edition of Foresight journal, but let me tell you about the main findings. So I'll first stop on what unicorns are. Many of you know what it is, but anyway, they have some specifics. Unicorns are private companies that achieve a market value of at least 1 billion within 10 years and has not gone through an IPO, and at least three quarters owned by the founders. Up to now, the studies of unicorns are fragmented, and the publications encompass not a full list of the unicorns available. Not a single piece of research analyzes the migration flows for unicorn founders. Our research is credited for the full sample of unicorn companies as of July 2022 assessment of the unicorn founders' migration flows instead of legal entities, full coverage of the unicorn founders' migration countries, comparison of unicorn donor and recipient countries by key indicators of their development, and the use of publicly available data on universities in the open sources that their unicorn founders graduated from. The purpose of the research is to be able to comprehensively evaluate the unicorn founders' migration patterns. The importance of foreign talents and factors of international unicorn migration is what matters. And professors William Kerr of Harvard School, as well as Professor of California University Robert Farley, note the importance of foreign talents and their mobility. Most active inventors, with more than 200 registered patents, migrate 5 times more often than their less productive colleagues. One of the most talented, one of the most mobile group of talents are the Nobel Prize laureates. 1/3 of them work and live outside their country of birth. About 70% of software engineers in Silicon Valley were born outside the US. And about 40% of the world's largest Fortune 500 companies were founded by first or second generation immigrants. And in this context of special interest is to look into factors of unicorn founders migration. Well, what impacts the geography is the venture capital, local learning opportunities, top universities and research centers, local implicit knowledge and talent clusters, and digital infrastructure. To assess the migration flows, we use the Crunch-based software and database. As of July 2022, there were 1,357 unicorns registered in 49 countries. The Crunchbase represents some information and gives data. We have been able to identify the place of birth of 3,190 founders and the universities. 2,699 graduated. We also looked at their personal pages and profiles on social media, interviews, and other open sources. The research methodology includes several stages. First, identification, the unicorn origin, if the founder's country of origin are the same as the unicorn country registration. So it is a national origin unicorn. If at least one founder is a foreigner, it is considered to be a foreign origin unicorn. At the second stage, we singled out 3 groups of countries. Attracting unicorns, foreign origin unicorns dominate. Growing on their own, these have national origin unicorns that dominate. And losing everything, no unicorns, but given rise to a lot of founders that originate from these countries. So the innovation profiles were compared as by wealth, smart money, supply, technology, institutional conditions, and education and science. The data are given in the chart, and we also assessed the origin of founders and the universities to figure what the role of the universities might be, and we looked at the most attractive universities that the biggest number of founders graduated from. Around 30% of founders, 979, migrated and created a unicorn abroad. This is a testimony of their high mobility, 9 times higher than the average migration levels, 3 times higher than that of inventors, and comparable to that of Nobel Prize laureates that are one of the most mobile groups of talents. In total, 517 billion, 1 billion worth startups were created by the immigrants. 258 were created only by immigrants, and 259 had mixed ownership. Unicorn with migrant founders attract almost the same investments as unicorns without them, but cost 1.2 times more. Their valuation is 1.2 times more. The top unicorns list includes the SpaceX, American space exploration company, the Chinese Shine, a fashion brand, and a fintech startup from the US called Stripe. They rank 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the valuation of unicorns ranking. Now you can see in this figure, migration flows from the founders of unicorns. I'm not sure whether I can zoom in. that list. But later, I'll give data on the country-by-country breakdown of founders. 979 founders from 85 countries were identified, and they left or fled their country of origin and established a unicorn in a different country. Most of them migrated from Israel, India, China, US, and the UK. The most attractive or magnet countries are less numerous, 32 countries only. Most of the founders came to the US, the UK, Singapore, Canada, and China. These magnet countries or destination countries are active borrowers of migrants worldwide. They also supply a lot of talents globally. There are 55 countries that lost unicorns, founders only: Russia, Ukraine, Argentina, Portugal, and South Korea being the top 5. So here Israel and India migration flows are given. In the left-hand side of the slide, you can see the data on Israel. Out of 208 founders, 151 left the country, and only 4 founders came from abroad to live in Israel as of July 2022. There were 61 founders in Israel. The most expensive unicorns with Israeli origin, they include GoPuff, Rapid, a fintech startup, and the US recruitment platform Deal. And the GoPuff is a goods delivery company. With respect to the Indian unicorns, out of 339 founders, 145 left, and only 4 came to stay from other countries. 180 and 96 founders is a total number, mostly founded by Indians. And the top 3 most expensive Indian origin unicorns include Instacart, consumer goods delivery, then Rippling, and Falconix, a crypto trading platform, being the latter one. So the US and UK migration flows are diversified. 690 founders came to the United States from a lot of countries, and 55 came to the UK from 21 countries, and 46 left. Russia is a leader in terms of the founders that migrated. 38 founders left the country and no one arrived. The most expensive Russian unicorns are a UK fintech startup, Revolut, by Nikolai Staronsky, an American online platform, Miro, by Alex Chardin and Andrei Pusid, and a US consumer goods delivery company, GoPuff, that was mentioned before, and one of the founders is Rafael Ilshaev. The countries differ in the terms of the level of migration flows, national diversification, and the diasporas that dominate. There is no evident leader in the United States. Israel and India have more or less equal shares. In the UK, the natives of Israel predominate. In Singapore, the Indian natives. The main suppliers of founders to Canada and China are the United States. With respect to the top 20 countries, as per the number of the unicorn companies, they differ in terms of the number of unicorns established by foreign founders. Here we can see some of the countries that grow their own unicorns, like South Korea. And in other countries, the share of foreign founders may go up to 73%, like in Singapore. Among the countries with more than 50% of foreign founders, we can name the US, China, India, Mexico, and Switzerland, to mention a few. All in all, we have singled out 3 groups of countries. Those attracting unicorns, 7 more unicorns, over 50% of which were founded by migrants, like here, US, Singapore, Switzerland, Mexico, Indonesia, Israel, and Germany. The second group is growing unicorns on their own, 7 or more unicorns, less than 30% of which are founded by migrants. Among them are China, India, France, Israel, Republic of Korea, Australia, Japan, and Sweden, and they're losing everything. Countries, the no-goes, no unicorns, but these are countries of origin for more than 8 founders: Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Romania, Poland, Bulgaria, and Pakistan. The first group of countries accounts for 62% of all the 1 billion worth startups, and the second group 30%. And in the third group, there are no unicorns. Tatiana, unfortunately, we're stressed for time, so probably you could tell us about some most important salient points, like universities. Let me note the key features of the parameters. We compared and contrasted countries by parameters: the money supply, wealth, institutional conditions, science and technology capability. If there was some deviation away from the average values, well, the factor for the attracting countries, the factors were considered to be attractive factors. If in some indicators the growing their own unicorns countries prevailed, those factors went into the group of that were propitious to growing unicorns. And if a third group of countries lagged behind in some of the parameters, that group of factors was categorized as retention factors, and their low level of development, the low capability in this respect, is not allowed to attract unicorns in such a country. And venture capital is a prerequisite of attracting unicorns, as well as universities' capabilities and world-known scientists and scholars, and the high level of R&D spending is also propitious to attract unicorns. Well, the high hygienic factors for retention of unicorns include several technological development factors like IPCT bids and IP registration, conditions and institutional conditions. The number, just a second. I apologize for this slight pause. The values of these factors are in the extreme column, like protecting the rule of law and the property rights matter here. So a quick word on universities. Universities play an important role in growing unicorns. Like for the top 20 universities account for around 40% of all founders. The cream of the crop universities are Stanford, Harvard, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The Stanford University graduates include Elon Musk. For Harvard is John Collison, this Stripe startup, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Kyle Vogt, graduated from that place, and it is a car manufacturing startup in the US that he founded. And I also would like to note that these three universities Well, the worth of all the unicorns that the graduates of these universities founded is 1.2 times higher than the value of other unicorns, and the universities have a significant impact in attracting the foreign founders. Every third immigrant who founded a unicorn graduated from the university in the country of migration. About 87% of foreign founders graduated from the US universities, and 75% of founders who graduated from top 20 universities founded a unicorn in the country of graduation. This parameter is 3 times higher than with respect to all other universities that graduated founders. I suggest we stop here, because I think you have briefed us of the main things, of the most pivotal points, because the article is worth reading as long as and as soon as it comes out. So you shouldn't tell us all of it. You shouldn't be a spoiler. So it was no go to admit this amount of information into 15 minutes of the time limit. Thank you very much. I cannot comment on all of that. Like, if I start commenting one issue, that will kind of be a crush for us. And what is astonishing is as follows: like, the losing countries may seem to be part of the unfair world, and they absorb all the juices from the rest of the world, all the waters and powers, all the intersystemic analyses and non-serious theories also, but kind of that held no water as a result. Like, the United States attracts 70% of all the unicorns, am I right? More or less. But they also give away a lot. They rank fourth in terms of the number of those who've left the country. 50 people left the US and founded unicorns in other countries. Like, China also grows more those of their own. So, but it's a two-way street. They go to the US and they come back, and the people from the US come to China. Around 32 countries are the pivotal ones for unicorns and innovation. People come and go between these 32 countries. I think this is the pattern of uneven proportions. So people will leave this or that country, and it's okay. Once they leave the United States, they will leave your country. But the main thing is to attract founders to your country. So you should be within this select circle of technological leader countries. I think I will now finish here, stop here, and Kirill will tell us something about a paper that we have just read and peer reviewed, and probably next year it will appear as an academic result. So, well, people go to countries that are rich and full of money, and we have figured and tried to figure and calculate the flows and the cross-country analysis of the venture capital flows. Please focus on the main things. Good. On the main points. Good afternoon, dear conference participants. What I want to note is that Bruno has been able to fit in the rest 3 presentations with his kickoff one. Like, he spoke about São Paulo and the foreign investors that were attracted by that city, and others followed. But I will show you something that resonates with that.
I don't want to talk at length, but what I'm going to show you is the following. So it all depends on your entrepreneurial dynamism, and that will definitely affect the development of your city. But that is driven by a small number of organizations. The business community might be drying up. I read some stats like only 4 out of 100 of firms live more than 10 years. Now we need to understand these firms, who they are, what money they can attract, and that will help us to shape local policies. So it's great that we have this new concept, unicorns, and we pay more and more attention to it. And there's been multiple attempts to figure out how much money they attract. Most of the literature focus on a particular geography, but we haven't found the focus on cash flows. So we wanted to do a country-specific study. Now let's look at the number of unicorns. And the peak was 2021. That's following the bubble. And that's the data as of July 2022. And as you can see, we have lower than half of 2021. Now, those of you who have been following this story, you might confirm that in 2022, the pace of newly established unicorns was much more muted. That's due to economic growth in emerging countries, not just in developing countries, not just in developed countries. Take China, and there are also regulation issues. There have been lockdowns in multiple Chinese cities, and that doesn't help to attract funding to unicorns. Now, the main questions are: what is the structure of venture investments in unicorns? How are these flows distributed across the world? How dependent are unicorns on foreign investment? What countries attract most of the investors? Is there a difference between unicorns that attract and do not attract foreign investment? And who feeds these unicorns? Let's look at the key players of their strategies at their portfolios. We've used a major database, which is Crunchbase. Now, what do we have? Now, total of 8,397 transactions between 2004 and July 2022. That's a hefty amount. And so we had the data on money raised for 82% of all transactions. We studied all of the unicorns that had that status as of July 2022. So we haven't overlooked a single unicorn. Now, every transaction have a person who, or the company who do that transaction, and there might be several investors. So we have a total of 8,063 unique venture investors. There are some overlappings, like there's going to be a total of 33,644. So some of the investors overlap. And for our geographic reach, it's 89 countries. No country data was provided for 901 investors, so there might be some private funds or small funds, and Crunchbase doesn't have the data. So it's one of the restrictions, then there might, since a small number, it could, basically disappear between the big countries, and there's little visibility for them. Now, if one transaction has several investors from several countries, then we just share this information evenly, since we don't have this exact information. So we use the averaging principle here. Now, in brief, our methodology is very simple. We have the country of investment, the transaction amount by one or several investors, and the country of unicorn. And on both sides, we have countries. Now, this is a very brief one. Most of the venture investments are not for round A, not for seed, that's mainly for B, C, and D. And I will not comment on it. So that's how the map looks like, in billions of US dollars. So I only have the countries that provide at least 1 billion. What we see is that all the key investors, that's the US. They account for 32% of all investments. Now, that's quite an interesting chart. You have top 20 countries by investment in unicorns. Now, we can calculate the share for investment in total amount of funding into unicorns of this particular country. Now, if you take China, Japan, and the US, they can safely say that they are independent from other countries in terms of venture capital raised. Now, if we go further, looking at France, South Korea, the Netherlands, Norway, Indonesia, Turkey, well, as we can see, the figure is extremely high, starting from like 67.6%, and that overlaps with Bruno's intervention. So I would even call it venture dependence on foreign capital. Well, here's a typical example. Just one of the cases. Let's look at India. 80% of the funding raised come from different countries. So you can see the bulk belongs to the US, now India, the UK. So it's just 1/5 of all the money that comes from India. Let's take oil. That's the biggest transaction in the history of Indian unicorns. SoftBank and the founder, Ritesh Agarwal, they provided funding to it. So that's an app for a rent. So they've raised 1.5 billion US dollars. Now, if we compare it with some other indicators that we looked at in the previous research, that's R&D scoreboard, 2,500 companies, the academic rankings, Nature 500, scientific organizations ranking. There's a reverse dependence. If the country has a lot of its own innovative companies, these are companies that are listed on the exchange that invest a lot in R&D. If you have a lot of leading institutions and academia, then you have a low dependence on international capital. We also need to do some econometric models. That's part of our plans, but here's the idea that I wanted to share with you today. And the US is a country that shares most of the venture capital. They basically impose their own funding on the countries. And it seems that the American market is very much saturated, but investors in India, from Europe, prefer to invest in US unicorns. Now, we split all of the unicorns in three categories. First, those that raise money from domestic investors, like I'm from the US, I attract money from the US. That's orange. The gray one is those that attract only foreign funding. So I'm from the US and I attract only money from Russia. And the biggest share of the pie is mixed investment. Now, what about orange? What about this orange group? These 100% only US and China. And as for the gray one, we have 41 countries, and the share of China and US is really small. That's those countries that cannot find venture capital over there in their own country, and they are looking for the money abroad, but they still remain headquarters in their own country, so they do not migrate. Now, if you compare it by the estimated value and the attracted venture investments, well, it's much more obvious here. Then you're going to lose if you only invest money from your own country. And it's not just based on the average data, we also use the median value. So unicorn from this group attract less money and they cost less, their capitalization is less. And now who's winning? It's those who get money from abroad and from your own domestic investors. It means that you're ready to work in both ways. So unicorns is all about globalization. Now who feeds them? One of the biggest questions. Now look at the top 20. So you've got most of them are from the US, 3 from China, 1 from the UK, and 1 from Singapore. So you have Tencent here. It's a holding investment firm, but it positions itself as a major gaming industry player. And another one, Temasek Holdings, that's from Singapore, and that also invest in startups. Let's look at some of the portfolios. Now, that's the amount of unicorn deals by the fund. We know that Tiger had 367 deals, and we've removed some overlapping because Tiger could have invested into the same unicorn several times, but we now know that Tiger invested into 212 unicorns. So every 6th unicorn has been invested by this US fund. Now let's look at this portfolio, and we can see that most of the money is invested in the US. And second is India. Like most of the US firms, it's geared to domestically looking at unicorns inside the country. Now, we have some plans to merge it all together. We want to look at this 133 unicorns, and we want to look at those 133 unicorns and figure out how many of them were established regionally in the US. Maybe the Tiger brought some of them over to the US. Let's look at Temasek Holdings. Diversification is higher. You have 30 from the US, 20 from China, and 13 from India. So a much more even distribution. China's 10%. Well, that is geared to its own market. It's more than half of the portfolio. Then second is India, and the US is third. So we have SoftBank Vision Fund that's located in the UK, although it has some other roots from other countries. So we believe it's a UK fund, and although it comes from the UK and it seems that money comes from Japan, but the portfolio still focuses largely on the US. Kirill, we need to make a pause here. And here's the Russian company shares Pro invested in unicorns, and all of them are American. 2 of them have been founded by migrants from India. That's it. Okay, you don't need to mention everything, just pick one. So we can see that unicorns raise most of the venture capital investments during the rounds, and unicorns in most countries are highly dependent on external venture capital, and a few countries show low dependence. Well, we've had a very productive event, and I hope it's wants to pacify and to bring peace to the world and spur economic progress. Yes, indeed, the US is dominating, but they've been given money, they've been getting money, and it's not a black and white story. It's not. It doesn't mean it's going to steal from anybody. Country might win, although it might lose some of the unicorns. We need to study that. Well, here's what we've been thinking with our colleagues. Well, they might have left Russia following 2014 and the venture capital shrank, but there's a way out. You might call it crutch, or it could be the second best scenario, third best scenario, but we still have scenario. SoftBank is still a bank. They might have bought some robots to show its innovation, but they set up a venture capital fund and they've invested into hundreds of unicorns. They can do that, right? Take a look at China. What's their path? They don't have any SoftBank. They have just big firms, big firms, mega corporations. We've challenged US firms in terms of their ambitions. Take Huawei. It's top 2 in terms of R&D research, and they've been growing at high pace. So they established unicorns. They don't just buy startups. It's not through M&A deals. They don't kick founders out. They're replacing them with managers. A unicorn has to be the property of the founders by 70%. So they share the money and they grow these unicorns. It's a model. That's the Chinese path. Now there's another path like Singapore and Georgiy said, and other countries set up state venture capitals. It's like they fund the funds. They invest and set up funds, and I think that Singapore invests state money, and they have invested in former Russian unicorn. So the Singaporean government is, or the taxpayers of Singapore, the elderly from Singapore were interested in that unicorn, right? So that's another option. So there could be the fourth or the fifth best scenario and 10th best scenario, and maybe Russia could come up with its own efficient combination, but we yet to see that. But as of today, well, I think we'll share the publications with you through our Express colleagues. As you see, there's so many topics on our radar. We just wanted to show you a glimpse of what we have. If you're interested, we're going to share some of our stories and publications if you want to work together. Yes, we are ready to work with you. Thank you for taking part in this roundtable. I hope it's not the last time we going to stage these events at Foresight and other fora like this. We're going to revisit this issue, and I hope that our deliberations will yield will inform policymakers, and hope that there'll be more companies that disrupt the world. They'll be born. There'll be more of them in an ever-growing number of countries. Thank you, colleagues. I was really happy to see all of you. Our session is adjourned. Thank you so much, and goodbye.